Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we will review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Eruvin, pages 63 to 69, Samach Gimel through Samach Tet. 63, Samach Gimel. Hamoreh halacha bifnei rabo chayav mita. If a person issues a halachic ruling in the presence of his teacher, of his Rabbi, that person is chayav mita, deserving of death. Now this is a bit of an exaggeration. It doesn't mean that an earthly court will execute this person. Far from it. It's just to say that we are very dissatisfied with a person who shows disrespect towards his teacher. That it's an important religious value in Judaism to show deference, to show kavod, honor, to the person who has taught you Torah and not usurp their prerogatives and issue halachic rulings when they're around. However, there's a little bit of a caveat, a leniency, in the sense that a young scholar is allowed to examine the kashrut, the suitability of his shechita knife, the knife that he uses for kosher slaughter, and he need not show that knife to his own Rebbe, but rather for personal consumption, personal use, the scholar can check his own knife. Samach Daled, 64. Shatui al yitpalel, a person who drank wine should not daven, should not pray. In palel tzvatot tefillah, however, if he does, the prayer service counts in his favor. He has fulfilled his obligation. Shikor, however, if a person is really drunk, al yitpalel, he shouldn't pray. In palel tzvatot toeva, and if he does pray, it's an abomination. So we draw a distinction between having had a little bit of intoxicating beverage where you shouldn't pray, but it's okay in the end, versus a lot of an intoxicating beverage where you shouldn't pray and it's a disaster, it's an abomination if you were to say a prayer service. What is the difference between a shatui and shikur? So the answer is, a person who is a shatui is able to still speak in front of a king. Yachol daber lifnei hamelech. If you put him up in front of a president, a head of state, a king, he could engage in conversation and it wouldn't be a complete embarrassment. However, a shikor is a person who's so utterly drunk that if you put him in front of a head of state, he would be unable to engage in conversation. Samachay 65. Shikor mekar. If a person is drunk, but they engage in a financial transaction, buying and selling, the transaction is valid and is not voided. Also, avar avira, if a person who is drunk commits a sin, sheyesh bo mita, that has capital punishment associated with it, mitinoto, will execute the guy. He doesn't get off just because he was drunk. Malkut, if it's a corporal punishment type of crime, malkinoto will give the corporal punishment. The general principle here is that a person who is drunk is considered mentally competent for all purposes, except patumat tefillah, that he is exempt from prayer. However, there's another caveat here. All this is said, provided that the person did not reach the state of inebriation, of intoxication, of that of Lot, when Lot engaged in relations with his daughters. But if you're that far gone, so utterly drunk that you don't know what's going on, patumiklum, then you were exempt from all punishment. Samech Vav 66. The Gemara draws a comparison between making an Eruv Chatzerot and renting out the premises from a Gentile in order to facilitate making of an Eruv Chatzerot. So the rental is the schirut reshut. And the Gemara says, just as the Eruv can be made with a food contribution that is valued at less than a shavapruta, a very small amount, so too the schirut, the rental agreement from the Gentile, can be done with an amount of money that is pachot mishavapruta, less than a pruta's worth, so a very infinitesimal amount. Samech Zayin, 67. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Kahana, so Rav Yosef said in the name of Rav Kahana that we were in the house of Rav Yehuda. The following was said: when it comes to acting on a Torah law, where there's an ambiguity as to the law, and questions are being raised, intellectual questions as to the formal ruling, that first we examine every side of the issue, and we try to counter and rebut any challenges to the ruling, and only afterwards do we act on that ruling. However, b'drabanan, when it comes to application of rabbinic law, avdin and maseh, first we do whatever it is we need to do, and then after having already acted, we will then engage in intellectual discourse to try to rebut whatever objections there were to the ruling. Samachet 68. Seduki hareu kenachri. The Gemara says that a Sadducean is like a Gentile. Now, a Sadducean is not a Gentile. A Sadducean is a Jew by ethnicity and by religion, except for the fact that he participates in a sectarian group that we think is heretical. So the issue at hand is whether or not a tzedeki is able to do bitul reshut. Can he waive his rights in the chatzer, thus facilitating the making of an eruv chatzerot for the other Jews in the courtyard? Or is he treated like a Gentile where bitul reshut is insufficient and there must be a lease agreement? So Rashi explains, how is the tzedeki like a Gentile? That he's not able to do the bitul. We must do schirut in order to facilitate making an eruv. However, Rabban Gamliel Omer, tzedeki eno kenachri. Rabban Gamliel says a Sadducee is not treated as a Gentile, but rather is treated as a Jew. Samachtet 69. Hahu denafak bechumta demadusha. A certain person went out in the public domain wearing a basket of spices. So this person was violating the Torah law of carrying in the public domain. He was carrying b'reshut harabim. However, even though this person was disregarding the law, they did not want to be identified publicly as a brazen Sabbath desecrator. When he was walking on the street and saw that a rabbi was coming, Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, he quickly hid the evidence of his transgression. He hid the basket of spices. Amar, so Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya's response was, Kegon zeh, a person like this, who, though they might be a Sabbath desecrator, still does not want to flagrantly violate the Sabbath in a public setting, bifar hesya, such a person, mevatel reshut Rabbi Yehuda. Such a person is still considered a Jew, and in the viewpoint of Rabbi Yehuda, is able to relinquish his rights in the Chatzer, facilitating the other Jews to make an Eruv Chatzerot, and it's unnecessary for there to be a schirut, a rental agreement, a lease agreement, because this person is not reckoned as a Gentile. Why? Shemachal Shabbat B'tzina, because his Sabbath desecration is only in private. Everyone have a great week.